guys, welcome. My name's Wendy and I am a Pipa teacher based in Toronto. So today we're going to talk about something very basic in Pipa. It's called the Tan and Tiao. So the Tan Tiao is actually on your right hand is the Tan and the Tiao. I'm going to talk you through on how to do this, as well as some of the most common mistakes I see my students making, and that way you can figure out how not to make it while you're practicing. So one of the first basic thing is that in order to achieve your Tan Tiao, usually it's on your right hand. So your right hand will form a loose fist. So this is my tight fist, as you see. A loose fist is just a little bit hollow so that you can see through it. So with that loose fist, on your first finger and your thumb will be slightly apart. Pull them apart like this. So you form still a round shape, loose fist, so that you can almost see through it, but not quite. And then that way, you can use the smaller joints as you're doing the pluck. So now the goal of the pluck, the Tan and the Tiao, is actually to land on the same place on the string. So that way it will sound identical when you close your eyes. So now, in order to achieve that, we have to make sure that they are as close as possible, and you're also using your smaller joints. I tell my student to use your finger as a kick, using a kicking motion instead of pressing on the string and release. So that's number one. The most common mistake the student makes is that they press their fingers on the string and release like that. Instead of doing that, we want you to place it as close to the string as possible, and then you pluck it. That way it will release a more resonating sound rather than a pushed, a forced sound. Number two that you need to recognize and be a little bit wary of, number two mistake, is the fact that your thumb has to be always in a bent position. A lot of students, they end up doing this because once they plucked, they forgot to put it back to the original position. So it becomes pluck and then put it back to the original position, right? So once they forgot, as they do the plucking, it will become something like this. It will look like this. So it will look like this. And that's not what you want, because their fingers are all like what I call the chicken beak. So you want your fingers to be nice and round like this as you were plucking. Third things I see a lot of people do is your wrist. So for your wrist, you don't want it to be like this, nor do you want it to be bent out like that. You want it to be flat and neutral, in a neutral position. And then when you're doing the pluck, you want to make sure that you're plucking on the string, but using the wrist in smaller motions, not twisting like this. So that's a third mistakes I've seen people do, is twist with their wrist, and that's not what we want. We want almost like a fanning motion, like if you have a fan, then you will be fanning yourself in like that, and that's the motion that we want. It's more like a parallel motion. You never ever see the underside of my wrist when I do this. So that's the wrist motion. And then when you add the wrist motion, you need to make sure you add the small finger motion like this. So I'm going to demonstrate the Tan Tiao now. So the Tan Tiao, first of all, you're playing between the last fret and the what I call the bridge. So you want to be halfway. It's the best sounding place. So halfway between is like around here somewhere. And then when you're doing plucking, you need to make sure that you are, first of all, loose fist. Second of all, nothing is touching on the side. I'm not holding my pipa like this. I'm loosely, and it's not touching the pipa whatsoever, my arm, my forearm, on my right side, okay? And then on my left side, on my right hand, when I do the plucking, I need to make sure I'm using my small joints like this. So when your first finger kick out, your thumb is in that place. And then when your thumb kicks out, your first finger comes back. So they're occupying the same space, but never at the same time. Okay, so it's an interchange like that. So slowly you go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You see how I use the finger forward, and as I do my wrist, I also have my finger kicking outwards. And as my wrist goes back up, my thumb also goes back up like this. And my first finger retracts itself. And then as my first finger goes out, my thumb goes into that place. So you can do this interchangeably. And usually in Pipa, we do a lot of the plucking interchange like this. Hardly do we ever do double thumb like that. And for double pluck, sometimes we do it depending on the rhythm of the piece. So thank you for watching. I hope that you learned something from this lesson, and I hope that you have a great time practicing Pipa.